How are you? So glad you're here. I know there's so many places you could be on a rainy Saturday afternoon, but you're spending it with Hearne Fine Art. So I'm Barbara Hearne. I'm the director of Hearne Fine Art, and pleased to introduce Marjorie Williams-SMITH once again to this space. This is the demonstration programming for Black fields, crops cultivated by enslaved Africans, tobacco, cotton, rice, and sugar. And Marjorie has been on quite a journey to create this exhibit, and we're very appreciative of the hard work and the patience you put forth. So, Ann Wagner was supposed to be here to introduce and talk about Silver Point, but it seems she's been in an accident. We are holding her good thoughts, so we will be checking on her. But that being said, Marjorie Williams-SMITH.
Thank you. Oh, if you like, since we're a small group, you could
We don't want to get in your way. Let us know.
So, thank you all for being here. I know that's Barbara said, be anywhere, but I appreciate you here. And talk a bit about the materials I use to make a Metalpoint drawing. Oftentimes people ask me, how did you get into this? Well, this catalog was the beginning. Well, the exhibition that prompted the catalog was the beginning of it. Way back in 1985 at the, what was then called the Arkansas Art Center, which is now the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts, had this exhibition, Fine Line, Drawing with Silver in America. And I went in and I had an afternoon free. I thought I would go in and just, to see an exhibition. I love to see work and get inspired. And I walked in and saw, I don't know, must have been 80 or more drawings, all made in some sort of metal. And I thought, what in the world? Oh, it's just gorgeous. It was gorgeous. And I heard about Silver Point when I was in art history classes and how it was used by Raphael, Michelangelo, and everybody. And I thought, well, gee, I didn't know people were still doing that. Well, little did I know there was a revival of artists in the 20th century rediscovered the material and was using it. And I saw all of these great drawings. You can see this book has been well loved. But just some incredible things. And so I thought, how do you do this? So I walked around and looked through everything, and I thought, this is really cool. I went back several times, bought the catalog, and I'm just looking at that. And when I saw it in person, it was like the material was just kind of like blown on. You couldn't see a mark really, how they did this. And so I bought the catalog and read it many, many times to get an idea, because the author was very good about talking about not only the history, but then how the materials were used and where they, where they got materials and the types of things they were using. So I used that, as well as in the very back, each artist's work was listed, and it kind of detailed what materials they used. In some instances, even telling me what kind of paper, what kind of board. That was very informative, so I thought, great, I'm going to try it. I went to what was called Junkins. Yeah. If you remember Junkins, the art store at that time was on Main Street. And I went in and I asked for some Silver Point. And they said, what? And I thought, well, it looks like a piece of metal in a holder. Something like this. I'll put this one in it. It looks like that. And it had metal and silver was in it. Oh, yeah, we got that. So he showed it to me. I said, well, okay. Took it home. It wasn't silver. It was like stainless steel. And it didn't work. So I thought, okay. I had some jewelry. Took it apart. I had a ring. That was like one of those expandable rings. And it was She supported art. She would be fine with this, took it apart, fashioned a tool, taped it to like a rod or something, and started working. And that's how I got started. And so I just kept, it was trial and error. The first few were not that great. And went back to reading this and looking at the pictures, go back to the exhibition, look at the drawings, to see if there's a way that I can understand how to do it. And it seemed like it was lots of hatching and cross-hatching of marks. Just kind of doing this and piling on like that. So I need to practice this more. So I went and got some pen and ink, put the metal away, got pen and ink, and just started drawing with the metal, with the pen and ink, to really understand line work and how to make that happen. Once I felt comfortable with that, once I got comfortable with that, I went back to the metal. So I actually was able to finally get real silver wire. We were traveling on the East Coast, found a jewelry supply place, and said, I want some silver. So I think I bought like 2 inches of silver wire. And I already had the holder, and just, put it in this. And this is just like a mechanical tool. You could put a graphite stick in there, right? There's a claw end on there, and just put that in there. Of course, makeshift, take something to a dowel rod and just sharpen it. Now for sharpening, and I didn't see this in there, but it came upon an Arkansas stone. And I asked my husband, what would you recommend I use to sharpen the tool? He said, I'll get you a stone, on stone. So I used that to get somewhat of a point on there. So, going back to this again. Question?
Well, do you care if we interrupt with a question? So you rubbed to get a point on silver, but did dust fall off that you could then use for something?
Well, it probably could have, but it was so little that I would have needed a lot more. So I didn't worry about it.
And one other question. So that was then whatever, the Arkansas Art Center.
Yeah.
Is that part of their permanent collection?
No, this was a traveling exhibition. It was organized in Florida. I think the name of the museum is the Norton. I think it was the Norton Museum. Norton Gallery of Art. It was in West Palm Beach, Florida. So it started in 1986, this exhibition. 85, I'm sorry. Then went to Pensacola, and then to the Arkansas Art Center, and then on to a museum in Massachusetts. So it was a traveling exhibition. And so it was in the Art Center from October 4th through November 17th. So about a month, a little over a month. So I went back as much as I could to see it. Because I wanted to see it in person. It looks different in person than when you're looking at the book, right? So I just trial and error. What kinds of grounds did they use, and what kinds of supports did they use? So I had some regular drawing paper, artist paper, like some B.K. Reeves or Arches paper, a nice smooth watercolor paper you could use. And I had some white acrylic gesso, Liquitex. There's different brands. And I had read in here, acrylic gesso was one of the things they would use. The main purpose for that is you cannot leave a mark with silver on plain paper. Will not leave a mark. It's too smooth and too soft. Okay. Back during the Renaissance or even prior, the artists were using metal because they did not have graphite. Graphite wasn't discovered until the early 16th century in the UK. So they were using other stuff. They had chalk, right? And they had metal. And they had parchment and they had vellum. They didn't even have paper, right? Paper was like, had to make its way from China to get all the way to Europe. Okay, so they finally got paper. But before, they had to create some sort of coating on that surface in order to leave a mark. So I read again. I don't know if I read it in this, but there's another book called Lives of the Artists, and it talks about things that artists back in the Renaissance did with their material. They would take dried chicken bones, grind them up. That's got calcium in it, right? Grind that up, mix it maybe with a pigment and saliva, which made it sticky, and they put that on the surface. Now, way back when I started this, I was working at teaching at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, and I got a sabbatical, and I said, what I want to do in my sabbatical is I want to go research Silverpoint. So this was like early 1990s, when I went to the National Gallery of Art in DC to see their examples in their collection. And they had these really small, about this big, images made in metal. And once I realized they were mixing saliva with this stuff, I'm like, I wouldn't want to have to coat a piece bigger than this if all I've got to do is mix saliva with it, right? So they were relatively small, if that was the case. And they were like either a rose color or pale blue. So they were mixing some color in there. The benefit of that is you have this mid-value color. You go in with the metal, which would then be darker. You'd have your lines, you can make your shadows. And then they would highlight with white, chalk, or watercolor, right? So that you would get this dimensional sort of effect. So if you look at any of those drawings, say from Michelangelo or even Dürer, and look at how they highlighted areas in the drawing, so you would get this effect. Okay,
So they were using this process.
they were using
Michelangelo,
yes, Da Vinci.
Dürer, what's his name? Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah. So they're using metal. They had the silver and lead. Your grandma would say lead pencil. Well, because it was lead.
Yes.
It really was. It wasn't graphite, right? So, but once graphite was discovered, and the sheep herders were using it, that's how they kind of found it. The sheep were coming back with all this stuff on them. Like, what is this? They found it was this deposit of graphite. And it got on the sheep, they could wash it off. But then, can we use that for something else? And eventually it trickled down to the artists. And they could use a drawing tool. But it was soft, and you could erase. For these people who were grinding the chicken bones and doing all this, if you made a mistake, what would you do? You couldn't erase. They would maybe rub that off with some dried breadcrumbs, which would take that ground off. They'd have to re-grind, re-coat the surface. That might mean mixing up a new batch, which doesn't match the original. So it means like, we gotta be really careful before we do what we're doing, so we don't make a mistake. Right? So you can imagine just the tediousness of that. All right, so fast forward to the 20th century, you don't have to worry about it quite that. Okay, so I go to the store and I buy acrylic gesso, which I had anyway, because painters are using this to prime their canvas, right? So had that already, coated some paper, and just got started. And once I got comfortable with that, I thought, I'm gonna branch out. I want to try some of the things they did here. I found that they were using copper. They were using gold. They were using other metals. So now, how do I get? Hi, join us. Pull up a chair. Chairs. Where do I get these things? So my husband said, well, you can get the copper at the hardware store. Just buy some electrical wiring, peel plastic off. Got copper. So, yeah. Copper wire, of course, now people know I'm into this, they give me stuff. So, got this, where you can get very, very thin wire, but using copper. And they have copper wool. You've ever used that for scrubbing your pots and pans? Copper wool will do something. Steel wool does something else. So I love to experiment. So I did a lot of experimenting. So I thought, one artist told me that if you use steel wool over time it would rust and it would turn red. Wow! I gotta see that. I'm still waiting. I have not seen the red. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. But on a board like this, and this is Museum Now, right on that wall, you can't see that drawing, but there's a drawing on that wall that I did of cotton mold. And I used this process, then went back and drew the cotton with pencil, and then erased out. And with this, I could erase. Erased out what I wanted it to look like a cotton. So I could get back to the white of the board.
And do you use just a regular eraser?
I used probably a kneaded eraser. Started out with a kneaded eraser to get a good bit of that off, and then go back in with a magic rub. Magic rub could take a little bit more off. Now with my erasers, and they look kind of like a block, but I get them home and I start cutting them up and making different shapes so that I can control how I erase. So I saw somewhere in here where somebody had used steel wools. I gotta go try that one. I wanted to try everything.
And is that just plain old steel wool?
Steel wool from Home Depot, or I don't know where else.
In the box full of
In the box of Willow or something. You don't want the soapy one. You know
And
what?
it will turn red.
I'm still waiting.
Maybe
Not on the paper, but
That's right.
yeah, it would rust. So
I have one that's rusty. But it had the soap.
also
so
say
you
you
use it.
don't want to use that one.
Right.
So well, maybe I need to spray it with water and leave it out for a while. See what happens.
That's why.
Yeah, we can try that.
So does this continue to come off? I mean, you rubbed it on there.
Yeah. Now if I don't do anything, it's not going to
It
come
just,
off.
okay.
It'll just
You
stay.
would have to apply pressure to get
Yes.
it come off.
Right.
Is the erasability because it's the steel wool or because it's the acrylic gesso?
I don't know. That's an interesting point. I have to experiment with that. So my early drawings, if you've seen any, and then Garbo's got some out in the hallway leading toward the framing area. There's other drawings of just the roses or flowers that I did that series for many, many years until I did this. And just experimenting. So I experimented with the copper to see what that might do. And one of the first drawings I did with the copper, because someone said it would go green. You know how it gets patina after many years. And I thought, great, that would be great for the stem of, say, a rose. And then I could go in with the silver and see what happens. And so I did that drawing about a month or so past, nothing, didn't see any change. And I got a little frustrated. So my husband, who's also an artist, had a big wooden shelf, lots of shelves in there in his cabin. I just kind of threw it in there, thinking, I don't care, I don't see it anymore. I got frustrated, forgot all about it until about a year later. I was cleaning it out and found that drawing in the back. And that copper had turned yellow. I mean, it was obviously yellow. And the silver had tarnished and it was kind of brownish. Whoa. That's not what I expected, but that was kind of cool to see that it go yellow like that. I'm going to use that again, so I continued to experiment with that. And as I got more confident with it, I got bigger in my drawings and just wanted to just really get more masterful with that. And so the Art Center, I think at the time, the director, Townsend Wolf, really liked Metalpoint. And so after this show, about 2 or 3 years later, he brought in another show. It was a 2-person show, 2 guys from Pennsylvania. And they were going to do a workshop. Oh my gosh. I'm going to that workshop. When is it? They said it's on a Saturday. Wait a minute. Can't go. I had 2 small kids and my husband worked on Saturday. I'm like, I can't go. So I called them and I thought, will they go on a lunch break? And they said, well, sure. They would probably take about an hour and a half. Great. I just wanted to talk to them and ask them some questions, you know. So they said, okay, that's fine. So I went up and I had baby in a stroller and a 3-year-old. And we all went up to Art Center and walked in and, you know, everybody had been working since the morning session, all these things. Oh, this is so good. And I told the guys that I had been experimenting with this and just wanted to kind of pick their brains. Oh yeah, well, we would have loved to see some of your work. I said, really? They said, yeah. It might have been just throwing me off. I don't know. I said, well, look, I only live like a mile away or less. I can go and get it, come back. Okay. So took the kids, go home. I made a total peanut butter jelly sandwich. It was lunchtime. Gave that to them. All went back, took my portfolio, showed it to these guys, and I'm like, wow, okay. Like, any advice? You know, give me some ideas. No, just keep working, just keep working. Okay. That's all. Okay. So I packed it all up and went home. A couple of years later, one of those gentlemen remembered what he saw and invited me to go to be a part of an exhibition, travel exhibition at Silverpoint. What? Oh my gosh. Now this is before internet and before email and everything, so everything was by mail or phone call. So he sent me something through mail. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. So this is a catalog from that early show. And of course, my stuff back then was so light, you can't even hardly see it. It's this one. And it was from slides. So things have gotten a whole lot better. But the neat thing about being in this show was that I got to see work from other artists. And they got to see my work. So this was really cool. So in this exhibition was another artist named Susan Schwab. Let me see if I can find the piece. It's not alphabetical order. This is one of Susan's pieces here. And she's more of an abstract artist. So,
Is she still working at?
yes, she's still working in Metalpoint. And so many years later, I'm thinking like 8 years later or so, she remembered my piece. And she recommended me for another Silverpoint show, which was going to be in Savannah, Georgia, at the Tel Fair. And so this is a catalog from that exhibition. And some of the same artists, but this time my piece reproduced a little bit better. This one right here. Right? And a very nice write-up about the show, beautiful catalog, and all these artists. I mean, I was just so blessed, honored, you know, just like, how do I deal with this? Being in with all these people, this is just great, you know. And then this show, someone saw it and it went to Indiana. And so some of the same artists were in there. And this gentleman, George Service, he was one of the two artists that had been in Arkansas and saw the work. But my piece reproduced better. Now we're starting to get into some digital things right here. And the museum asked each artist if they would give them a piece. Heck yeah. I mean, because then I'm in a museum, you know. So yeah, they can have that one. So that's in their collection. And then,
So where is that piece now?
it's at the Museum of Art, Science, and Industry in Evansville, Indiana.
Cool.
Then there's another Silverpoint show. This one is at the Art Club in New York City. So again, another catalog. And you see how this one has the color background highlighted with white. So just trying to learn as much as I could, continue to experiment. Let's see if I can find that piece. By now, I'm using black background. Now, how did I get to the black background? Okay. At some point, Susan Schwab and I started communicating through email. And I had another sabbatical that I said, okay, I'm still researching Silverpoint, right? So It was on black gesso. And I said, what in the world is this? She said, go buy some black gesso. I didn't even know it came in black. I didn't know it came in colors, right? So I went to the store, sure enough, they had black gesso. Gosh, man, okay, we're going to get some black gesso. So I bought black gesso, and this is an example. This is, again, another window from a mat. And I coated it with black gesso. And then I went in and just started experimenting. I'll pass this around. I often will do a test of the metal on that particular surface, and just to see what will happen. And so once you're still leaving the metal on the surface of this coating, right? But it looks like the color of the metal. So I mentioned, I said that the copper looked yellow when I was using it on the white over a period of time. But when I'm drawing with copper on black, it looks like copper. So you get that red tonality, right? So I'm actually seeing the metal. Gold looks like gold. Silver looks like silver, but it's still a tarnish, right? I've experimented with, let's see, this is called, and I think it's so I can tell you. Okay. This one is bismuth. Bismuth is an element on the periodic table. And I had not heard about bismuth, even though I took a science class. I don't remember anything about that periodic table. But a friend of mine, who's also in Metalpoint, did a piece with bismuth. I said, where do you get that? He said, I'll send you some. So this is what he sent. And it looks very much like, I don't know, the color of stainless steel or silverish or whatever. It's very brittle. So I thought I would try that. I may have made some sample marks of bismuth from there. And then Susan sent me this, which is originaltum. This is a metal that was once used in ancient times. Romans used it for making coins, right? And it is a mixture of both copper and zinc.
Which one is that one? You
The
say,
orichalcum.
that's that one at the top.
Yeah.
Which one is this?
Now that's the bismuth. Oops. So she actually sent two. She sent one for my husband, one for me. And sent me this holder, which is still got that kind of claw thing coming in.
Well, yeah, I like the whole.
That's, yeah, come a long ways from where you
That's
started.
nice. Yeah, yeah. So she sent that to me. So I had a chance. We finally had a chance to meet. When I got that, yeah, Susan Schwab, I finally got that other sabbatical, and I said, I'm gonna go investigate silver point on colored materials. So I went first to Savannah, Georgia, because Janine Cook, who kind of organized the Telfair show, had been using some of these things. So I first visited with her, and then a few months later, when I had spring break, we went to New York and visited Susan and got to see her studio, and then she took me around to visit other Silver Point artists who were living in the city. So that was kind of fun, because then I got to kind of actually meet these other people. And so then I kept working with this black, which gave it a whole different dimension. Because instead of drawing the positive thing, I'm drawing the negative. Because any place I want highlights, I've got to use the metal. And anywhere that's a shadow, I just leave it black. So I felt like I was drawing in reverse. And that took a little bit of trial and error in getting a better understanding of that. But that's what I used in this one, right? So with this was taken from a photograph that my daughter Aisha sent me when she traveled to Puerto Rico. I said, "You're going to Puerto Rico? Don't they have sugar?" Yeah. She said, "Yeah, in fact, we're going to a sugar plantation on a tour." I said, "Great, take pictures." Okay. So she sent me this, and I was against the sky. So the sky has some very light watercolor wash. And then I went back in with the black gesso and kind of painted in the silhouette. And then down here I came back in with the metals to give you some more definition. So if you look closely, you can see some of these colors. You start to see the red, you start to see the gold. The aluminum is very light. It reflects light really in a different way. It looks kind of whitish. And when I was first experimenting with aluminum, I was working on white, and I did a drawing, and I swear within 3 months, it looked like it had faded. What is going on? So I went back, I kind of redid it. I redid it about 2 or 3 times. And then I gave up. I said, I'm just going to leave it alone. Well, I found out later that over time, the aluminum gets whitish. So that was what was happening with that metal. So don't do a drawing of aluminum on white. It's going to get lighter, but it's great on black because if it's going to get lighter, then you're going to see that more over time, right? The silver, you've seen silverware, that's tarnishing and that's getting darker. So that's going to change in terms of its presence on that.
So, when you started that, what color was the background when you started? Did you start with one whole black or?
No, I started on white
You
background.
started on white.
Yes. Come on in, pull up the chair.
And then you said you painted the upper stalks.
Right, so I
So
had.
you painted it with what?
I had all the paint. 22 by 30. And then watercolor paper. I'm using a Fabriano 300-pound watercolor paper. Smooth, nice heavy paint, right? And I soak it in water so I can stretch it and put it on a piece of plywood. I tape the edges with gum paper tape. And then let that dry so that it decreases the buckling that might happen. I might not get buckling with 300-pound paper, but I don't want to take any chances. So I mask that off. And then I go back in with the gesso, acrylic gesso. Then I went back with white watercolor, very, very pale, and just did maybe to about here.
So what color was the gesso that you put on first? White. Okay.
I didn't want to use any other color because I knew I was going to come in with this blue for the sky. So I wanted, you got to have that light coming through to get your color. Okay. Then, because you can still see some blue down here, I wanted those areas to still look like sky. Then I go back in and paint it in with the black gesso. Some of these lines with marker, or maybe a pen, something else that I felt I could get a thin line. And maybe leave some of these little dots here so you can see through. And then this down here, this all black gesso. Then go back in and draw with the metal. So I'm always, for me, that's fun. That's a lot of work. But it's fun work. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I want to see what else is going to happen. After a while, it's like, I don't want to get bored. I want to find something else that keeps me excited, that I can look forward to it. I want to know what's going to happen. So when I do these little testings, and oftentimes, like on this white one, I'll put a date. I'll put a date on there. So like I can come back a few years later. But this one was from 2020. So now, this is 4 years later. What are these metals going to look like on white 4 years from now? And so I may have like bronze wool. I got that at the hardware store also. So I think in furniture making, when they're finishing the wood or whatever, they use some of these different wools to smooth that down. And so I got that at the hardware store. So that kind of, I'll pass that on too. And the backside I was testing word toys if you were from there.
So maybe you can't answer this, but how many different colors did you use in the bottom 2/3?
It depends on how many different metals. So for this one, and I try to make sure that on the tag, you're gonna see what I use. Silver, copper, gold, and aluminum. So the silver point may start to look a little brownish. You'll see some gold that's gonna look a little more yellow. Aluminum's gonna look kind of bright. So you're seeing the colors of those metals.
And are you recording how these change over the years? I guess that's
Not
kind of
really.
hard because
Not
it
really.
may not be in your possession.
Well, if I'm lucky. But I do these tests, and I kind of get a feeling. Now, I still have some of the, I have the very first one, the very first silver point drawing I ever did. I'm about to have another show at Fort Smith, and that is going to be in that show. So that show is kind of like moments in memory, or memories of silver, or something like that. So it's more like a retrospective. It doesn't have any of these pieces in it, and nothing from this series, but it'll be from that very first metal point drawing onward to about 2020. So, and having some of these older pieces gives me an idea of what's going to happen over a period of time. Another thing that I saw in one of Susan's pieces, and I think it was more so in this book, that she had incorporated smoke. I'm always flabbergasted when I see some of these things. Like, how did people do that? So this one here, this page, had smoke in it. And I wondered, how do you do that? How do you get smoke in a piece? Well, that's got to have some fire near that, right? So I experimented with that. Now that's going to be in this other show at Fort Smith, but I had I think it was an incense stick. Lit that up and put it near the paper and just make sure you get that smoke stream happening. And then I got the smoke bounce on the paper and leave that carbon. Right? I'm like, wow, that's so cool.
Did you burn up before you got it there?
No, I wasn't. I knew when to stop. But yeah, I had to be really careful. And I had this one drawing that I had this rose where every petal on the rose fell off except one. Just that one was still holding on. And so I had that. I had a doily phase to it, like the wood paper doilies. I'm going to see if I can bounce that smoke against the doily on my paper, on this drawing. That might burn up. We're just going to go for it. You know, I still got the rose. I brought it again. You have to kind of just let it go. If it happens, it happens. I don't care. So I did it, and I bounced it. I'm like, whoa! I got the pattern of the doily in smoke against that image, and I titled it "Whisper to One." Now that's going to be in the show for Smith. So December 7th, December 6th, going to go up there. It's going to be up there. But like I said, I love to experiment. I don't want to stay in the same place. Right? So found that you can even buy gesso in other colors than black and white. Right? We went to this is from Holbein. This is a really nice brand. We were in Chicago, and I went to Dick Blick. So anytime I go to Chicago, I go to Dick Blick to see if I can get any other thing that I can't get here. And found that, gotta buy it. I tried that out, and it works. And I can highlight with white, right? Just like from the Renaissance artist.
So is that what you used on that piece?
Well, that piece, I tinted the gesso with gouache. Right? Now, this is yellow ochre. I didn't use yellow ochre now, I just wanted to show y'all. And this is Winsor Newton's, a really good brand of gouache and watercolor painting. But this was a little too strong in this color. I would have had to just use a little bit. But study, the smaller tobacco plant on this wall came first. And I wanted it, the whole story behind this tobacco is, that's probably the first crop that enslaved people had to cultivate. When they came to Virginia in 1619, and I kind of did some research, there was a guy named Rolfe. He was experimenting with trying to grow tobacco in Virginia, and he finally got it to go. So, he got some enslaved people out and cultivated this, 1619. The ramifications of tobacco in this country, if you look at it, how harmful it has been. Not just for these people who were cultivating it, but now even to this day, right? And when we were trying to go photograph tobacco fields in South Carolina, we could only find two. Because one was half, plowed, and they only had like 2 or 3 rows left. And that's where I got these pictures from. And then we got back in the truck, kept driving, and found another field, that black one back there. We found a big field of tobacco. And so I took pictures there. But when we were in this first field, just these few rows left, we had migrant workers out there harvesting. They had this one truck in the front, this plow thing, that was cutting the plants, and it would throw it back to an open bed truck that was right behind it to catch it. And had these migrant workers in there. Now they had on maybe a long sleeve shirt, a bandana across their face, a cap. It was August. I was sweating and I wasn't even working, but they were in the sun working, having to catch this stuff. So I did some reading. The cancer rate amongst migrant workers in tobacco fields is incredibly high. I mean, you can't stop anything through a bandana. They didn't have any mask, real something to keep that from getting in there. So cancer rate, skin cancer, lung cancer is incredible. All right. Then once they picked it or harvested, they take it to a barn and have to hang it to dry it. You're still exposed to all of this. So it's just, you think about this, it just blows your mind. It just blew my mind. So I wanted to have like a sick color. And I thought the yellow in this one felt kind of sick, right? It just made me sick thinking about it. And I thought, maybe it's a little too sick. I don't need it. But I needed to do a big one. I wanted a bigger one. And I brightened it up a little bit. But just wanting to capture these leaves. And these leaves are huge. And there's yellow on them. And once it's ready to harvest, you may see some green, but then yellow. And if you've ever seen, kind of reminded me a little bit of big spinach leaves or collard greens, kind of like that kind of texture a little bit. So sometimes the color is significant, but like in that cotton field right there, there's a hint of blue above, which I think will contrast with the silver. Once it starts tarnishing, it's going to get that brown. So you get that variation here. And then in the corner, you can't see it from here, but the furrows in the rice field, where you got some blue in the sky, and I wanted to see what's the silver going to look like on top of the blue once it tarnishes. So that was kind of interesting. And then in the lower area, you got some green. And so I used some watercolor and made some colored pencils. And then the part that looks like weeds, those light weed things in there, scratches with a razor blade. So that's another risky. How many different cutting tools can I use to get the kind of thing on? You'd be surprised how many blades I had to go through. Because I would do one and then it wouldn't do it anymore. It would like leave a hole. Had to cover that in with some green. So it was like I'm going through blades, a lot of blades to try to get it to make a thin line and not mess up. Anything for the art, I'll do it. I'll try it.
Your tobacco comment makes me think of Dean Mitchell, the watercolor artist, because he spent a lot of time in those barns and drawing those barns.
Yes.
And the exact same comments about tobacco.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's just, it's been a real journey, learning about the plants, learning about the history people. This one right behind here, the apparatus is called the trunk, and that is the irrigation tool to flood the rice field. Now they're not using that in Arkansas. You go to the fields right out here by Stuttgart, and they're pumping the water into the field, and when it's time to harvest, they drain the field. But rice didn't come to Arkansas really until like late 1800s, early 1900s. So when did rice first come? It came first to South Carolina with people from West Africa, right? And I've even read where, if you read Black Rice, I read that, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. They would put rice kernels in their hair or in their head wrap, so that they felt, once I get wherever I'm going, maybe I can plant my own, have my own food or something, But once they were bringing people from these regions of Africa, they were getting sick because they weren't used to that European diet, right? You got people dying because they can't eat this food. So what do they eat? So they go back to Africa and they bring the yams and the black-eyed peas and the things that Africans were eating. And you gotta grow that here so that they can eat that so they can pick your cotton, So the rice was very critical. But South Carolina's terrain was not conducive to growing rice. So people literally had to move earth to make rice fields. Removing trees, removing the stumps, making the furrows, and using that trunk, which was the boat, in Africa to irrigate the field. Now, you had some areas where they were growing rice further inland, but you had some where they were growing rice closer to the ocean. And if they were near a river that emptied into an ocean, they could use that trunk so that when the tide would come in and push water back up the river, it would go into these fields. And then they could close the trunk when there was enough water. Kind of like a canal sort of thing, right? And then when it's time to harvest, you want to drain the field, open that gate when it's low tide, get the water to go back out. So this gentleman in Georgetown, South Carolina, Don Quattlebaum, invited us to come to take pictures. And as soon as I got out there in that field, you could smell rice. You know how it smells when it's cooking? And I was thinking about that the other day. I made some brown rice. That's Don Quattlebaum's field. I could smell it, I didn't smell that in Arkansas. Out there in that field, I didn't smell that. But I smelled it in his field. And he's growing Carolina Gold, Charleston Gold rice. These are different, types of rice. And he's not selling it like in Kroger anywhere. He's selling it to the restaurants in South Carolina who are really trying to recreate the culture and the cuisine of South Carolina. Yeah.
Just one, the reservation, just a little bit back. I'm thinking from mentioning the tobacco, because when my wife and I first married, her people from North Carolina.
Okay.
So you see a lot of tobacco, and I thought it was greens.
Okay.
I still get teased 40 years later. I still get teased 40 years later for
Well, that is
that
the
observation.
same texture,
And then the second point is the yellow we were talking about, and you were saying equating up with sickness and cancer. Well, I had a dear family member who had passed, and when I went in their house, everything that was white was close to that color from smoke.
Yeah, I know. That's second hand, the tar and stuff that's in there. My mom succumbed to lung cancer.
It was my mom.
And she might have stopped smoking when she was 30, but she passed when she was like 63. I'm like, how do you get lung cancer? You don't smoke, But it was the secondhand smoke. She worked in an office where her boss was like right there in this office. He smoked chain smoke. So that secondhand smoke, we didn't even realize how harmful that is until not too long ago. So just trying to capture essence of our history It started in these fields. It started, 400 years ago. And, of course, this land, who had the land first? You know, I mean, this history is interesting. It can be uncomfortable, but we got to deal with it. You know, I think we need to deal with it. And I'm on this journey. I still have more to do because there was a fifth crop that's not on the heading of this show, and that was indigo, a dye that was used, still being used in Africa, right? When we went to South Carolina, my goal originally for going to South Carolina rather than North Carolina, because I knew North Carolina had the tobacco. But when I found out they had the rice, I could get 2 in 1. And then I found the indigo, 3 in 1. I got it. But beforehand, like months beforehand, I was putting out feelers. You know, can I visit your property? Or where can I go to get this? So I thought I had found the tobacco farm cultivated by African Americans. They own that land. So we're going to the black people's tobacco farm, right? Couldn't get anybody, couldn't email anybody, but it was there in Horry County, northernmost part of South Carolina. They were growing corn. We get there and all we see was corn. Dang. Well, the growing of tobacco in South Carolina has decreased over the years because more people are not smoking, which is good, right? But we drove around and we found that a little bit. And the rice was there, but I could not connect with anybody who's growing indigo. And I sent email to this one lady and she said, oh, I'm sorry, I don't do it anymore. I moved to Georgia, got out of it. I'm like, okay. Found a museum not too far from Charleston who had educational plots. And they had a small plot for indigo. And I contacted them. They said, nope, ice got to it. We had a late ice storm. It's all gone. Oh. So we didn't get to do it. I went to the art store there and bought some indigo dye. But, you know, I wanted to see the plant.
I wonder where they got it.
Right.
The people, there's still people there. I just couldn't connect. 3 weeks ago. And I think this was, the Lord's work. 3 weeks ago, I get the New York Times, read it every Sunday. Pull out the art section. Front page. Indigo revival in South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Where was that last year? Right? Okay, so I gotta go back. Interestingly enough, the artist in the next room, Vanessa, I can't remember her last name, but Vanessa and I met. She's talking about my project and everything. I said, I'm trying to indigo. She said, girl, I can look you up because I'm from South Carolina. She said, they have a big indigo festival in May. I'm going. I gotta go. She said, yeah, just stay in touch. Let's stay in touch. We can do something to get you out there to visit that. You've heard of the Gullah Geechee culture there, and there's a lot of people involved in Gullah Geechee who are also involved with indigo and trying to preserve the tradition from Africa in terms of dyeing and making clothing. So my thought is, somebody asked, how are you going to incorporate that in your pieces? I'm like, well, I could dye the paper, I could dye the gesso. It's going to come in there somehow. So, and then I'm going to do the plants. I'm going to photograph the plants.
How did you get interested in plants? Do you do any work other than plants?
No. Well, way back in graduate school, I was doing people. And that was fine. But I took a few years off. I was working as a graphic artist in New York, freelancing and everything. And so once I got out of graduate school, I had no time to do my work. I was working 24/7, basically, doing other people's work. Weekends, and so once we moved here, and I was expecting our first child, my husband was artist in resident at the art center, so I had all this free time. And I had some dried flowers on my desk that my husband had given me for our anniversary. So I just draw that. Rose. And then to draw another rose. Oh, that's kind of fun. I'll do another one. And I didn't know. And I just kept drawing roses. So for a while, it was just roses. You know, so anybody got some roses? I'll just take them off your hand. But then other things kind of got interesting. You know, lilies and daisies and all sorts of other plants. And it's a still life. It's right there with me. I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to take pictures of anything. It was convenient. And then when I had kids, a baby and then another baby, you don't have a lot of time. I started teaching at the university. Basically, I had maybe weekends and summer to do some work, to create a body of work. So it was challenging. And, you know, talking to other female artists, they don't have kids because then they get to spend time in the studio. One of my professors, though, when I was in school, told me her biggest regret was that she did not. Her biggest regret was that she didn't have kids. She said, if I can give you any advice, you need to take time for family. So I did that. But so the still life was great because then I could do it in the evening. Thank you.
I gotta tell you, I'm so glad you told us about that background color. I hadn't necessarily noticed the difference, but now that you pointed out, it's dramatic. But that's not a real loving background color. I mean, it doesn't bring out happy thoughts to me. That was worse. And I didn't understand it, but now I understand it.
Well, because like I said, I'm mixing things in with this gesso. And I mixed some black in that, so it's making it a shade. And felt that, you know, could maybe have that eeriness about it, uncomfortableness about it. But then when I went bigger, I'm like, I want to brighten that up just a little bit. I can see more of the nuances in the movie. One other little thing, and then I'm going to invite our other speaker who's down here, Ann Wagner, to talk to you about some of the historical backgrounds and so forth. But this is marble dust. This is traditional silver point ground. And in this is, it's got pigment, it's got rabbit skin glue, and it's got crushed marble. So that's traditionally that mix that those ancient artists were using, you know, getting the calcium, the rabbit skin glue acts as a binder. All I have to do when I buy this is add water. Now, the interesting thing about it is I get more texture, I can get more of a rough surface. You wouldn't see it, but the metal, it picks it up. So I can get darker values with this than I can acrylic gesso. This is plastic. So no matter how hard I press, that's not going to make it darker because there's not a lot of tooth to this. But this has more tooth and will take more metal.
Does that have color to it?
No. So when I mix this up, it's white.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe that cotton field there, there's no paint in that one. It's just the background. And if I use this ground, which I probably did, I don't know if it's indicated on the tag, but using this ground, I can get darker. Now, remember I showed you the picture of that very first show I was in, how light that was? I couldn't get very dark. But then I was using acrylic gesso. Now, once I found this, I can get darker. I can put more because it's grabbing more metal. So I think about where am I going with this? What do I want to do? If I need those values, I might go with this. But if I'm going to use paint gesso, because I know I might go over with some paint. I don't want this to loosen up. I can add some marble dust, which will add the tooth to it, but I still get that plastic finish. So if I come back over with watercolor, that base is not going to change. All right? Whereas if I'm using a water-based ground and come over with silver point, if I had like blue, I'm going to wind up with a tint because about that chemistry, that difference that can happen. But I've been doing this since 1985. When I first saw that show. So you learn a lot over a period of time. And I tell students, be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. You know what you're doing, learn what you're doing, and reach out to other people. I got to meet lots of other artists who are involved with this too. I'm going to pass it over to Anne Rackman.
I don't know that I'm up to tell you the truth. I was just in a car accident.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you're here.
Got a bump on my head.
Oh no.
I'm serious when I don't believe that it was just a little while ago, so I'm not too sure at this point.
You're glad
I'm sorry, because I just, you know so much about the history.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and I want to show you what Anne brought. You can flip through this, the craft of old master drawings. So some of what I was telling you in terms of how they went about preparing their services, it might make you want to revisit some of that Renaissance art in terms of the drawings, because what they were able to do is just incredible. You know, with pen and ink. I mean, I learned so much when I go to a museum or gallery and look at, and this I'm pretty sure. Well, this is another one that's really been highlighted. It's not Metalpoint, but you know, having a mid-value background and going with a dark tool and then highlighting that gives it more of a dimension. So this is a pretty cool book. And then this one, the National Gallery of Art had a major Metalpoint exhibition, and I think there were maybe only 2 women in this show, Susan Schwab and what's on, okay. So this was an example of Susan's work. And I'll show you the piece earlier. And then the other artist, Carol Prusa. Carol Prusa was the other artist. So it's only 2 women. Could have picked more. But I can't locate her piece right out. But this was a great book in terms of looking at some of the earlier works, just the precision and this fine line. You know, why that title? Because that line is so thin. You press harder and it doesn't get fatter. You press harder, it doesn't get darker. You might mess up your ground, tear through it. You don't want to do that. But that line is just so pure. Right? There's no fuzziness about it. And I think that's part of the allure is the character of the line. Here's an example. Some of those earlier drawings, and then go back in, and sometimes you would see like a rust color, you know, just. And I like how they did this color because then you can get a sense of those colors. You know, so feel free to come up and look through the books, the magazines. I also had, I didn't look it up here, but
So did Jasper Johns work in Metalpoint?
something in there is, yeah. Here we go. I have these, now there's some commercial papers, commercially made papers that already have a coating on it. It's a very thin clay coating, right? Both sides, and great for Metalpoint. Okay? So I brought enough of these that everybody could try it, and there are some tools. These are silver point. Dick Boyd carries these, right? They're not fancy, but they will work. So you can make your mark, try it out. There is copper. If you have some jewelry, I always take my jewelry off when I'm about to draw because it might leave a mark, really. So if you got, here I got some gold, I'm not gonna let you use this one, but if you got your own jewelry, you can take it and, right, make a mark. y'all being here, and thank you for me going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. I'm so glad that you were able to share your experience with Silverpoint. I did want to give Ann a chance to just say hello. I know she might not feel like doing it, but just say hello.
I'm sorry that I'm just still kind of shook up at this point, but I'm just glad to be vertical and to have verbal conversation. So.
And we have another special guest this evening, Teshlani Propel. She's right here. She is the artist of the photo collages, so please check those out. She's an emerging artist from North Little Rock, so just wanted to give you some. So, all right, so let's play Silverpoint, right?
Yes.